Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Voices audio blog. For those of you unfamiliar with the drill, the Chosen Few Software Voices blog is a podcast all about raising up the creative and otherwise talented voices of tomorrow. Tonight we are doing exactly that, as we have a very special guest who might someday need no introduction. MK, how are you?
Hello, I am doing so well, and I am so excited to be on this podcast. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So, wasting no time here, let's start our first question. So, who is MK Zariel? Introduce yourself to the Voices audio blog.
Well, when my classmates ask me this, sometimes I just say the Tranarchist you were warned about. But in all seriousness, I'm a trans and neurodivergent anarchist, theater artist, and performance poet. I do counter info work, which I'll get to later in the podcast. I'm the youth correspondent for the Anarchist Review of Books, founded a queer organizing collective at my school and another in my suburb, and I'm very involved in my city's queer and trans organizing spaces. As far as theory goes, my strongest influences are the queer splashback tendency, the anarcho-feminist writings of Emma Goldman, and of course the Xenofeminist Manifesto.
Absolutely brilliant. You are just so well versed in all of this. It's so overwhelming to even hear about half of those things. It's amazing that someone your age is even doing any of that. So just brilliant.
Well, age is a heterosexist social construct, and I am so glad to be doing this work.
Fair. So that leads me to my next question. As a queer anarchist organizer, what are your highest priorities and what are you doing right now to make positive societal change?
Right now, given the rise in anti-trans legislation, the oppressive paramilitarism, statism, settler colonialism, and anti-Semitism in Palestine, the abortion rights crisis in the so-called US, and the use of RICO charges against the predominantly trans and POC Defend the Atlanta Forest movement, I think a lot about countering all forms of repression and control, from nation-states, corporations, and cis-heteropatriarchy itself. If there's one common theme in all my organizing, it's the prefigurative insurrectionary practice of creating queer spaces, whether through education or mutual aid or anything else. In my organizing, I try to position queer spaces as more than harm reductionist quote-unquote community support. Queer spaces can and should resist repression. Whether queer chosen families do that through legislative support around abortion and trans healthcare, mutual aid in support of queer, Jewish, and Palestinian communities, jail support for trans organizers facing RICO charges, or just supporting one another in our lived experiences that exist inherently outside statism. It's meaningful and beautiful to let our queerness negate all forms of control and hierarchy.
I agree with that 100%. And can I just say you are very well spoken? That's amazing.
Thanks.
And you are popularly known in anarchist circles as the author of Debate Me Bruh, a queer anarchist blog with both free and premium posts. What inspired you to create it, and what keeps you coming back to the project?
I created Debate Me Bruh to make Anarchy 101 types of conversations more accessible and less static, because I'd seen so many awesome introductions to anarchy, from Toward the Queerest Insurrection to Peter Gelderloos's Anarchy Works to the writings of, again, Emma Goldman, who was so formative for me. But when I actually talk to queer friends who want to learn about anarchy, they sometimes have really different questions than what those introductions cover. I wonder if their friends will accept them if they're anarchists, or how homophobia would be dealt with in anarchist spaces, or how they could protect themselves from gendered street harassment, or if decolonization is a part of anarchy, spoiler, it totally is, or how they know if they're an anarchist at all. I wanted to start this project to give voice to the questions that femmes, trans people, neurodivergent people, people of color, and everyone else who's marginalized even within some anarchist spaces actually have about anarchy, and to start conversations that don't end with me having the final word, but instead are generative and queered and atemporal, just like my gender. I come back to it because it brings me joy to teach my queer community about anarchy and to hold space for our visions of liberatory queer world making. Because that's all anarchy is, really, a queer space.
For sure. That is so brilliant. I do have a question, actually, like a spin-off question from that. I know that a lot of your work is like centered around like just creating queer spaces in general. And I'm interested like how in your mind exactly that connects to the broader anarchist perspective.
Well, I think anarchism is fundamentally about universal love or mutual aid or of care and however we want to define it. And I think even if people aren't using the A word, etc., as many anarchists don't choose to, if we exist in space, if we provide care to one another the way people always have, in a way that's fundamentally vulnerable and against heteropatriarchy, that isn't just about this sterile nuclear family form of care, but instead about creating networks that transcend the straight nuclear family, that in and of itself is anarchist praxis.
Wow. That's a really good way of tying it all together. I love that. Chosen Few Software is all about lifting up queer and trans voices in the IT community as well as in general. What is your greatest ambition and how do you hope to achieve it in the future?
I aspired to start an explicitly anarchist queer youth arts program one day. I've always found poetry and theater really healing as a trans person. As someone who experiences dysphoria, when I'm performing, I feel my embodiment is queered, and that experience is so beautiful for me, but it's not conflictual with the existent, and it can be. Queer performance can be every bit as disruptive as sabotage or protest or strongly worded manifestos, and this has always been a tendency within queer anarchy. In fact, if you read Emma Goldman's The Social Significance of the Modern Drama, she positions theater as the ideal cultural vehicle for anarchy. And if you look at the queercore movement or any of the demonstrations of ACT UP, it's always especially been within queer social movements as well. Well, I don't have plans for this kind of project at this point. I'd absolutely love to build this ethic, if not this explicit project, into my organizing in the future.
That is brilliant. As a queer person who also just is inherently creative, I relate so deeply to what you said about how creativity can be an outlet, almost a way to like not fend off, but just almost give a big bear hug to the dysphoria inside of you and like just almost have that melt away as you like embrace your authentic self. And I think that's really beautiful that you found an outlet of that sort for yourself.
Yeah, it's so meaningful that it isn't about erasing dysphoria, but instead making space for that in an inherently queer way. Because really, that's what anarchy is too. It isn't about erasing the oppression that we've all faced. It's about healing that in a transformative justice way by providing the most inherently queer care to one another.
For sure. And well, I think that's all the questions I had for you today, apart from this last one. Where can we find you online? What are you up to? Any shameless plugs? Share them right now.
Well, if y'all want to see any of my writing on youth liberation, etc., please subscribe to the Anarchist Review of Books. You can go to www.anarchistreviewofbooks.org to take out a subscription to this print-only publication in which I am published. And for any of my columns on Anarchy 101 topics or to submit questions yourself, you can just look up Debate Me Brah on Substack or go to debatemebrah.substack.com. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, and thank you for holding this space for queer creatives. This is so meaningful to have on the internet and in the world. So I guess I should say thank you for your anarchist praxis that you're doing right now.
For sure. I really appreciate your time tonight. Thanks, MK.
Thank you.
Dear listeners, that was MK Zariel, author of the Debate Me Bruh blog and all-around legendary queer anarchist. If you enjoyed this podcast and hope to see more in the future like it, please go ahead and check out patreon.com/chosenfewsoftware to support our software and audio production efforts. Thank you so much. See you next month. Bye.